The gleaming chamber of the Galactic Council stretched in a vast semicircle, its transparent dome revealing the swirling nebula beyond. Representatives from 57 different species occupied tiered seating, their murmurs creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and modulated tones as translation devices worked overtime. In the center of the chamber stood a simple platform, currently occupied by Dr. Helen Lark, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her navy blue Earth Federation uniform pristine. As you can see from the data, Helen gestured to the holographic display showing complex energy matrices. Our fusion containment method eliminates previous limitations on sustainable output. The implications for terraforming and atmospheric stabilization are significant. Helen paused, scanning the audience. Most delegates appeared interested, though several of the Uther representatives were exchanging glances. The Uther, with their pale blue skin and elongated craniums, had dominated galactic scientific advancement for centuries. They considered humans to be technological upstarts, barely worth acknowledging except as curiosities. Ambassador Zarya of Uthar shifted in her seat, her six-fingered hand tapping impatiently on the console before her. Her species' traditional robes of office, shimmering fabrics that seemed to capture and reflect starlight, rustled as she leaned forward. Dr. Lark. Zarya's voice carried the melodic cadence typical of her species, though there was an edge to it that made several delegates glance up from their data tablets. Your presentation has consumed 20 minutes of council time, yet I fail to see how this breakthrough differs substantially from technology the Uther developed 3 centuries ago. Helen maintained her composure, though her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the podium. Ambassador, with respect, our approach differs fundamentally in both application and efficiency. If you'll allow me to continue. I've reviewed your preliminary data, Zarya interrupted, rising to her feet. The movement was graceful but aggressive. Your efficiency claims are overstated by at least 30%, and your containment field would destabilize under any practical application. The chamber quieted. It wasn't unusual for scientific presentations to be challenged, but Zarya's tone had crossed from academic critique into personal dismissal. Helen straightened her shoulders. Ambassador, I assure you our models have been verified through practical demonstration. Perhaps if the Uthar Scientific Academy had accepted our invitation to observe the prototype. We do not waste resources validating primitive iterations of established technologies, Zarya replied, descending from her position and approaching the central platform. The council chamber's artificial gravity seemed to intensify with each step she took. Humanity has been part of the galactic community for barely a century. Your species still struggles with the basics of gravitational manipulation, yet you presume to lecture this council on energy dynamics. A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the chamber. Several human delegates shifted uneasily. Earth's position in the council was precarious, admitted more as a diplomatic courtesy than out of respect for human scientific achievement. Our work stands on its own merits, Helen replied, her voice steady despite the tension. The data demonstrates human arrogance. Zarya now stood directly before Helen, towering over her by nearly half a meter. Your species consistently overestimates its importance. Perhaps on Earth you are considered brilliant, Dr. Lark, but here you are merely quaint. Helen felt heat rising in her face, but kept her expression neutral. Science isn't measured by species, Ambassador, but by results. Our fusion methodology works. Your dismissal doesn't change that fact. Zarya's eyes narrowed, the vertical pupils contracting to thin lines. You dare suggest I am being irrational? That I, a graduate of the Uther Academy of Sciences, with 6 doctoral equivalents in theoretical physics, cannot properly evaluate your primitive research." The chamber had gone completely silent now. Even the typical background hum of environmental systems seemed muted, as if the room itself was holding its breath. "I suggest," Helen said carefully, "that you are allowing preconceptions about humanity to color your scientific judgment. It happened so quickly that many delegates would later claim they hadn't seen it clearly." Zaria's right hand moved in a blur, connecting with Helen's cheek with a crack that echoed through the stunned silence of the chamber. The slap was more than a physical assault. It was a cultural statement. In Uthar society, such an action was reserved for the most profound expressions of contempt, typically delivered by masters to the lowest servants who had committed unforgivable transgressions. Helen staggered back a step, her hand rising automatically to her face where an angry red mark was already forming. For 3 heartbeats, no one in the chamber moved or spoke. Then chaos erupted. The human delegates surged to their feet, shouting protests. The Galactic Council Arbiter, a tall, willowy being from the Navic species, activated the chamber's emergency protocols. A soft blue field enveloped both Helen and Zaria, separating them as security personnel converged on the platform. "This session is suspended," the Arbiter announced, their voice amplified throughout the chamber. "All delegates will return to their quarters pending investigation of this incident." As Helen was escorted from the chamber by human security officers, she caught a final glimpse of Zaria, whose expression held no remorse, only the satisfied look of someone who believed they had put an inferior being in their proper place. What neither woman realized in that moment was that the entire incident had been broadcast across every major communication network in the galaxy. And on Earth, where humanity's pride had just been publicly slapped, the response was already taking shape. Yea, Admiral Catherine Moore stood before the curved viewport of the EFS Invictus, watching as the massive warship detached from Earth's orbital shipyard. At 53, Moore carried herself with the confidence of someone who had risen through the ranks during humanity's most challenging period of expansion into the galaxy. "Admiral," her executive officer approached with a data tablet. "We've received the final deployment orders from Earth Command." Moore accepted the tablet, scanning the contents quickly. "Assemble the command staff in 30 minutes. We'll need to coordinate with the rest of the fleet before jump." "Yes, ma'am." The officer hesitated. "The diplomatic corps has also requested to speak with you. They're concerned about the military response." Moore's expression hardened. "Tell them I'll be available after our departure. This isn't a diplomatic mission anymore." As the officer departed, Moore returned her attention to the viewport. Beyond the Invictus, 5 other capital ships moved into formation, each representing the pinnacle of human military technology that had been largely concealed from the wider galactic community. For decades, Earth had maintained a careful facade of technological modesty, while openly sharing advances in medicine, agriculture, and basic energy systems. Humanity's military and high-energy physics breakthroughs had been classified at the highest levels. The strategy, implemented after humanity's first humbling encounters with species like the Uthar, was simple: learn, adapt, and advance quietly until Earth could protect its interests from a position of strength. The slap had changed everything. Not because it was a diplomatic incident. Such things happen regularly in the complex dance of interspecies relations, but because it represented a fundamental disrespect that Earth's leadership could not ignore without losing credibility both among its own citizens and within the galactic community. Moore's secure communication device chimed, and she activated it to find herself looking at the stern face of General Thorensen, Earth Defense Command. "Admiral, you've reviewed the orders?" "Yes, sir. We'll be ready to jump within the hour." Thorensen nodded. This is a show of force, Catherine, not a declaration of war. Make that abundantly clear to your captains. Understood, sir. Though I should note that moving 6 capital ships to the edge of Uthar space may be interpreted as precisely that. Let them interpret. Thorensen replied. Just make sure they understand we're serious about the apology and recognition demands. After the connection closed, Moore allowed herself a moment of reflection. 20 years ago, such a move would have been unthinkable. Earth simply wouldn't have had the capability to project power this far into the galaxy. Now, thanks to breakthroughs in propulsion and energy weapons technology, humanity could make demands that needed to be taken seriously. The slap heard across the galaxy was about to receive its answer. In her temporary quarters aboard the Galactic Council station, Helen paced restlessly. Her cheek no longer stung, but the humiliation remained fresh. The door chimed, and she paused. Enter. The door slid open to reveal Council Mediator Trell, a Vortan whose species was known for their diplomatic skills. The Vortan's translucent skin shifted through shades of green and blue, an emotional display that Helen had learned to interpret as concern mixed with caution. Dr. Lark, Trell's translated voice was gentle. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all. Helen gestured to a chair designed to accommodate various physiologies. Though I assume this isn't a social call. Trell settled into the chair, tendrils of vapor rising from the moisturizing vents designed for species requiring higher humidity. The Council is concerned about Earth's response to the incident. You mean to Ambassador Zarya's assault? Helen corrected firmly. Yes, Trell conceded. That characterization is accurate. However, mobilizing a battle fleet seems disproportionate to many Council members. Helen's expression remained neutral. The fleet deployment is a security measure. Nothing more. 6 capital ships with full escort complements moving to the border of Uthar space is hardly nothing more. Doctor. Trell's skin darkened slightly. There are concerns this could escalate beyond diplomatic channels. Helen moved to the small viewport of her quarters, gazing out at the distant stars. For decades, humanity has been treated as a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. We've contributed to galactic medicine, helped stabilize ecosystems on multiple planets, and yet species like the Uthar continue to dismiss us as primitive upstarts. She turned back to face Trell. What happened in the council chamber wasn't just an insult to me. It was a statement about how the Uthar, and by extension, others, view humanity. That ends now. What exactly does Earth want, Dr. Lark? Trell asked carefully. 3 things, Helen replied without hesitation. A public apology from Ambassador Zarya and the Uthar government. Formal recognition of Earth's scientific achievements, including our fusion containment breakthrough, and a revision of humanity's status within the Galactic Council to reflect our actual technological capabilities. Trell's skin rippled with complex patterns. The first 2 might be negotiable, though difficult given Uthar pride. The third would require a comprehensive technological assessment that Earth has consistently avoided. We're prepared to demonstrate certain capabilities now, Helen said, starting with our new fusion propulsion systems. I see. Trell rose slowly. I will convey your terms to the Council. However, I must caution that military posturing may undermine diplomatic efforts. After Trell departed, Helen activated her secure communication device, connecting directly to Admiral Moore's flagship. Admiral, how soon until the fleet reaches its position? Moore's face appeared on the small screen. 4 hours. Doctor, the Uthar have already dispatched observer vessels to track our movement. Good. Helen nodded. Have you received authorization for the demonstration? Yes. Earth Command has approved use of the gravitational lance if necessary, though they prefer we keep that particular capability classified if possible. Helen considered this. The gravitational lance represented one of humanity's most significant technological leaps, a weapon capable of manipulating gravitational fields with enough precision to alter planetary orbits. Its existence had been Earth's most closely guarded secret. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," she said finally. "But if the Uthor and the Council need convincing, we should be prepared to show them exactly what they've been dismissing." Ambassador Zarya stood before the Uthor High Directorate, her posture perfect despite the tension radiating through the chamber. The 7 members of the Directorate, the highest governing body of Uthar society, regarded her with expressions ranging from disappointment to cold fury. "Explain yourself, Ambassador." Director Velas spoke first, his age evident in the deep blue wrinkles around his eyes. "You physically struck a representative of another species during a formal council session." Zarya kept her voice steady. The human was being insubordinate. She questioned my scientific judgment and implied bias. "And this justified physical contact?" Director Mila asked, her tone making it clear she already knew the answer. "I acted according to traditional customs," Zarya replied, less confidently. "Traditional customs that apply within our society," Director Velas corrected sharply. "Not in the Galactic Council chamber, and certainly not with representatives of other species." Director Sorvin, the youngest of the 7 and head of the Uthar Defense Ministry, leaned forward. "Your personal indiscretion is now threatening to become a diplomatic crisis. The humans have mobilized a significant military force." "Surely they're bluffing," Zarya said dismissively. "Human military technology is generations behind our defense systems." Sorvin's expression darkened. "Our intelligence suggests otherwise. For the past 2 decades, Earth has been developing technologies they haven't shared with the Council. We've detected energy signatures from their vessels that don't match any known human systems." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. "What do they want?" Director Mila finally asked. "An apology," Sorvin replied. "Recognition of their scientific achievements and elevated status within the Council." Zarya couldn't contain her outrage. "We can't possibly validate their primitive research. It would undermine centuries of Uthar scientific authority." "Your actions have already done that," Velas said, coldly. "The question now is how to resolve this situation without further damage to our position. I recommend against capitulation." Sorvin said, "The humans may have improved their military capabilities, but they cannot match our combined strength. We should respond with a show of force of our own." Director Velas studied the younger Uthar for a long moment. "And risk open conflict over a slap." "Over our position in the galaxy," Sorvin corrected. "If we yield to human demands now, other species will question our authority. This is about more than one incident." The Directorate deliberated in silence, communicating through subtle gestures and expressions in the way only those who had worked together for decades could. "Very well," Velas finally said. "We will not offer an apology at this time. Ambassador Zarya, you will return to the Council station and maintain our position that the human research is derivative and unworthy of special recognition. Director Sorvin, mobilize our defense fleet as a precautionary measure." As the session concluded, Zarya approached Sorvin privately. "Do you truly believe the humans could pose a military threat?" Sorvin's expression was grim. "I believe we have underestimated them, but they have also underestimated our resolve. Neither is a comfortable position." Nay, the Galactic Council reconvened 48 hours after the incident, the chamber now under enhanced security protocols. Helen took her place on the presentation platform once more, aware of the tension filling the room. Ambassador Zarya and the Uthar delegation were present, though seated further from the central area than before. The arbiter opened the session formally. The council reconvenes to address the diplomatic situation between Earth and Uthar following the incident during Dr. Lark's presentation. Before we proceed, both parties have been granted time to make statements. Helen spoke first, her voice clear and controlled. 2 days ago, I presented research that represents years of work by Earth's finest scientists. That presentation was interrupted not with scholarly debate, but with physical assault, an action that violated council protocols and basic diplomatic respect. She paused, making eye contact with delegates from various species. Earth has requested 3 things: an apology from Ambassador Zarya and the Uthar government, recognition of our scientific contributions, and a reassessment of Earth's status in the galactic community. These requests remain open. The arbiter nodded. Ambassador Zarya, you may respond. Zarya rose, her posture rigid. The Uthar Directorate acknowledges that my action was inappropriate for the council setting. However, we maintain that Earth's scientific claims are overstated and derivative of established technologies. The Directorate sees no basis for reconsidering Earth's council status. Murmurs spread through the chamber. It was neither an apology nor a complete rejection, a classic diplomatic half-measure. The arbiter turned back to Helen. Dr. Lark, does Earth find this response satisfactory? Helen didn't hesitate. No. Earth has requested a formal apology and recognition, not an acknowledgement of procedural impropriety. Then perhaps, a new voice interjected, Earth should demonstrate the capabilities it believes deserve recognition. All eyes turned to Director Sorvin, who had risen from his seat among the Uthar delegation. Earth has spoken of scientific breakthroughs, Sorvin continued, yet has consistently declined full technological disclosure to the Council. If human achievements are as significant as claimed, demonstrate them. The challenge hung in the air. Helen glanced toward a small communication device on her wrist, then looked back at Sorvin with new resolve. Very well. With the Council's permission, Earth will provide a demonstration. The arbiter hesitated, clearly surprised by this turn of events. What form would this demonstration take? A practical application of our fusion containment technology. Helen replied. The Council observation deck would provide the best vantage point. Curiosity overrode caution, and within minutes, the Council delegates had relocated to the massive observation deck that formed the upper level of the station. The transparent dome offered an unobstructed view of space and, in the distance, the Earth fleet holding position near a small, uninhabited planetoid. Helen stood at the control panel of the observation deck, activating a communication link. Admiral Moore, we're ready for the demonstration. Understood. Dr. Lark, targeting the designated planetoid now. The delegates watched as one of the Earth vessels separated from the formation, moving toward the planetoid. For several minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a brilliant beam of energy erupted from the ship, striking the planetoid. Instead of an explosion or visible damage, the energy appeared to envelop the small celestial body. What are we observing? The arbiter asked, confusion evident in their voice. Controlled gravitational manipulation, Helen explained, as the planetoid began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, changing its orbit in a precise, controlled manner. Our fusion containment breakthrough allows us to generate and direct gravitational fields with unprecedented precision. The implications weren't lost on anyone in the chamber, least of all the military representatives. A weapon that could alter planetary orbits represented a fundamental shift in power dynamics. Director Sorvin's face had lost some of its blue coloration. This technology wasn't included in any of Earth's disclosures to the Council. No, Helen agreed. It wasn't. Just as the Uthar haven't disclosed their advances in quantum entanglement communication or the Meridians, their biological warfare capabilities. Every species keeps certain technologies classified for security reasons. She turned to face the assembled delegates. Earth has been developing in silence while being dismissed as primitive. That ends today. We are not requesting recognition out of vanity, but out of a desire for honest diplomatic relations based on reality, not perception. The demonstration concluded with the planetoid returning to a stable, though different, orbit. As the delegates returned to the council chamber, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. What had begun as a diplomatic incident over a slap had evolved into a fundamental recalibration of how humanity was perceived. Admiral Moore watched the proceedings from the bridge of the Invictus, the council session being transmitted to Earth vessels. Beside her stood Captain Rivera of Earth Intelligence, his expression thoughtful. Quite a revelation. Admiral, Earth Command was hoping to keep the gravitational lance classified for at least another 5 years. Moore nodded. Sometimes plans change. The question now is whether the Uthar will recognize the new reality or escalate. As if in answer, the tactical officer called out, Admiral, we're detecting multiple launches from Uthar space. 20+ vessels on an intercept course. Moore straightened. Battle stations. Maintain defensive posture, but do not power weapons unless directly threatened. The bridge erupted into controlled activity as officers moved to their stations and alert signals sounded throughout the ship. They're pushing, Rivera observed, testing our resolve. Let them push. Moore replied calmly, but make sure they understand the consequences of pushing too far. And in the council chamber, the mood had turned somber as news of the Uthar fleet movement reached the delegates. The Arbiter called for emergency protocols, and security personnel became more visible throughout the station. Helen found herself approached by representatives from species that had previously shown little interest in human affairs. The Meridian Ambassador, a being composed of what appeared to be living crystal, spoke in harmonic tones. Your species has been most discreet. Dr. Lark, we find this reevaluation enlightening. Discretion seemed prudent while we developed our capabilities. Helen replied diplomatically. Indeed. The crystalline being's surface flickered with internal light. The Meridian Consortium would welcome more direct scientific exchange with Earth, particularly regarding your gravity manipulation techniques. Similar overtures came from other delegations, each suddenly discovering a newfound respect for human science. Helen accepted these with gracious professionalism, though she noted that the Uthar delegation remained conspicuously isolated, huddled in intense discussion. The Arbiter called the session back to order. The Council must address the immediate situation. 2 military forces are approaching potential engagement range. This body cannot allow armed conflict between member species. Director Sorvin rose. The Uthar fleet is conducting routine exercises within our sovereign territory. If the humans perceive this as threatening, perhaps they should reconsider their own provocative positioning. Helen responded with measured calm. Earth's fleet was deployed in response to diplomatic insult, not as a military threat. However, we will not withdraw under implied threat from Uthar forces. The standoff continued for hours, both in space and within the council chamber. Communications between Earth Command and the Uthar Directorate remained tense and unproductive. As the situation deteriorated, the Arbiter made an unprecedented decision. This council will convene an emergency session of the High Arbitration Panel. Both Earth and Uthar will present their positions, after which the panel will issue binding resolution terms. The High Arbitration Panel, comprised of representatives from the 7 founding species of the Galactic Council, had not been convened in over 60 years. Their authority was absolute in matters threatening galactic stability. As preparations for the panel began, Helen received a secure communication from Admiral Moore. "Doctor, the Uthar fleet has taken up attack formation. We're maintaining defensive posture, but the situation is deteriorating." Helen's response was immediate. "Hold position. Admiral, the High Arbitration Panel is being convened. We need to give diplomacy every chance." "Understood. But be aware, if they fire first, we will respond decisively." The communication ended, leaving Helen with the weight of knowing how quickly the situation could spiral beyond control. Decades of human technological development in secret had created a military force capable of standing against even the Uthar, but actual conflict would devastate both sides and potentially draw in other species. The slap that had started it all now seemed almost trivial compared to the potential consequences. The High Arbitration Panel convened in a smaller, more austere chamber deep within the Council station. 7 beings, each representing one of the founding species, sat in a semicircle facing representatives from Earth and Uthar. Helen represented Earth, while Director Sorvin himself had taken charge of the Uthar delegation. The senior arbitrator, a Navik named Elos, whose age was evident in their almost translucent skin, opened the proceedings. "This panel has reviewed the events leading to the current crisis. We will hear final statements from both parties before rendering our decision." Sorvin spoke first, his tone measured and authoritative. "The Uthar Directorate acknowledges that Ambassador Zaria's physical contact with Dr. Lark violated Council protocols. However, Earth's response, mobilizing a battle fleet and revealing previously undisclosed weapons technology, represents a disproportionate escalation that threatens galactic stability." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the panel members. "The Uthar have maintained peace and order within the Council for centuries. We have shared our scientific knowledge freely, guided developing species, and enforced Council regulations. Earth's secretive development of military technology, while presenting a facade of technological modesty, constitutes deception on a scale this body cannot ignore." Sorvin concluded firmly. "The Uthar request that Earth's fleet withdraw immediately, that their gravitational technology be placed under Council oversight, and that sanctions be imposed for their deliberate technological concealment." When Helen's turn came, she stood with quiet confidence. "Respected arbitrators, Earth entered the galactic community just over a century ago. From our first interactions, we were categorized as technologically inferior, politically naive, and culturally undeveloped. This assessment, while perhaps accurate initially, became a convenient fiction that many species, particularly the Uthar, chose to maintain despite evidence to the contrary." She activated a holographic display showing a timeline of human scientific publications and Council responses. "Over decades, our contributions were systematically minimized, our discoveries attributed to assistance from advanced species, our innovations dismissed as derivatives of existing technology. When Ambassador Zaria slapped me, it was merely the physical manifestation of an attitude that has pervaded Council relations with Earth since our admission." Helen's voice remained steady as she continued. "Earth's decision to develop certain technologies in secret was not deception, but self-preservation. The gravitational lance we demonstrated is just one of many advances we've made. We kept these classified not out of malice, but because species like the Uther made it clear that humanity would never be accepted as equals unless we proved ourselves capable of self-defense. She deactivated the holographic display and faced the panel directly. Earth requests 3 things: formal acknowledgement that humanity has been systematically underestimated and marginalized within the Council, recognition of our sovereign right to develop technologies without interference, and establishment of new protocols to ensure all species are evaluated on actual capabilities rather than historical perceptions. The panel deliberated for hours, during which time both military forces maintained their positions, poised on the edge of potential conflict. When the arbitrators finally emerged, the tension in the chamber was palpable. Senior arbitrator Elos spoke with the measured cadence of their species. This panel has reached unanimous decision. Our findings are as follows. First, Ambassador Zaria's physical assault on Dr. Lark constitutes a serious violation of Council protocols and diplomatic norms. The Uther government will issue a formal apology and recall Ambassador Zaria for reassignment. Second, Earth's scientific contributions, particularly in fusion containment and gravitational manipulation, are hereby formally recognized as original and significant advancements. Third, Earth's status within the Council will be elevated to reflect these contributions, with corresponding representation on scientific and security committees. Fourth, both Earth and Uthar will immediately withdraw their military vessels to their respective territories. Fifth, the Council will establish a new technological disclosure protocol applicable to all member species, balancing security concerns with the need for transparency. The panel acknowledges both Earth's legitimate grievances regarding systematic dismissal of their capabilities and the Uthar concern regarding undisclosed military technology. This resolution seeks to address root causes rather than symptoms. The decision was transmitted simultaneously to both fleets and to the governments of Earth and Uthar. Within hours, the military vessels began withdrawing, the immediate crisis diffused by the panel's authority. 1 week later, Helen stood in the Council chamber once more, this time to formally accept the new protocols and Earth's elevated status. The ceremony was brief but significant, marking a fundamental shift in humanity's position within the galactic community. As delegates dispersed following the ceremony, Helen was approached by a familiar figure, Director Velas of the Uthar Directorate. Dr. Lark, the elderly Uthar, greeted her with a formal bow. "I wish to convey personal regrets regarding recent events." Helen acknowledged the gesture with a nod. "Thank you, Director. I believe we all learned valuable lessons from this situation." Indeed. Velas studied her with eyes that had witnessed centuries of galactic politics. "The Uthar have led for so long that we forgot what it means to adapt. Your species reminded us rather dramatically, not intentionally," Helen admitted, though perhaps some recalibration was overdue. The young ones, Director Sorvin and others, speak of this as Earth's ascendance and Uthar's decline. Velas said with a hint of resignation, "I prefer to see it as a rebalancing. The galaxy functions best with multiple centers of influence and innovation." Helen considered this, a perspective I believe Earth would share. Competition drives progress, but cooperation sustains it. Well said. Velas produced a small crystal device, offering it to Helen. "A personal gift, research notes for my own work on quantum field manipulation. Perhaps they will complement your gravitational studies." The gesture, an Uthar scientific elder sharing private research with a human, would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Helen accepted it with appropriate reverence. "I'm honored, Director. I'll ensure our relevant researchers reciprocate with their work." As Velas departed, Helen found herself approached by Admiral Moore, who had arrived at the station to participate in the security protocol negotiations. Quite a turnaround, Moore observed, watching the Uthar delegation depart. From slapping humans to sharing research in a matter of weeks, nothing clarifies perspective like discovering the primitive species can adjust your planet's orbit. Helen replied with a small smile. Moore's expression turned serious. Earth Command is concerned about the new disclosure protocols. They're worried we'll be required to reveal more than is strategically wise. The protocols have safeguards, Helen assured her. No species will be required to reveal technologies directly tied to sovereign defense. But the era of presenting false facades is over, for everyone. They moved toward the viewport, where the vast spiral of the galaxy stretched before them, countless stars representing worlds and species, each with their own ambitions and concerns. So what happens now? Moore asked. Helen considered the question, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. Now we take our place, not as conquerors or disruptors, but as equals. We've earned respect through capability, but we'll maintain it through wisdom. She turned from the viewport to face the Admiral. And perhaps most importantly, we remember that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the weapons we deploy, but from the moments when we choose not to use them. As Helen prepared for her return journey to Earth, she reflected on how a single slap, a moment of arrogance and dismissal, had triggered a cascade of events that reshaped humanity's future in the galaxy. The fusion research that had started it all would now proceed with collaborative input from multiple species, including the Uthar. Ambassador Zarya had been reassigned to a remote administrative position, her career effectively ended by her momentary loss of control. And humanity, once dismissed as primitive upstarts, had taken its rightful place among the technological leaders of the Galactic Council, all because one scientist had refused to accept disrespect, and an admiral had been ready to back diplomatic demands with military resolve. The slap heard across the galaxy had indeed declared war, not of weapons, but of perception. And in that war, Earth had emerged victorious.